What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Grady, and I listen to country music and whatever else I want to. And today, we have a massive album roundup that we're doing. We're covering 12 albums, and it's going to be a doozy of a video. But before we do that, I got to give a shout out to our sponsor for this video. Thank you guys for sponsoring. It's the good folks over at The Ridge. The Ridge wallet right here. You get these nifty metal minimalist wallets. All your cards fit in here. There's a money clip on the back. And what I like is it's a front pocket wallet. It sits there nicely in the front pocket. So if you're going to a concert and you want to wear some jeans that are tighter than Luke Bryan's, check out the Ridge wallet because it's not going to get in the way and be all over bulkified. So you can get 10% off your first order using the promo code Grady. It's down below. And a shout out to them for supporting the channel. Thanks, guys. All right, so let's get into the album roundup. We got 12 albums, like I said. Timestamps are down below. So I'm going to go, instead of going like worst to best or best to worst, just as they were released. So let's get into it. Oh, and I want to say, I have a Spotify playlist. A lot of you always say, I wish you would put like the tracks you like the most on a Spotify playlist. And every time I listen to an album, I put like anywhere between 0 and 3 songs from that album on my Spotify playlist, and I will have that linked in the description down below. The first album that came out in this time period was Cassadee Pope's Stages.
If my heart had a heart.
This was an album that I did not really enjoy at all. It's kind of overly... It's definitely too pop for my taste. It reminds me a lot of the Mitchell Tenpenny record, and it's pop in that way of trying to sound kind of smooth. And for me, Cassadee Pope's voice is best when it's like kind of angsty, whether that's on a song like Wasting All These Tears, or if like on her stuff with Hey Monday. And this just, it kind of leaves me wanting more. So I'd only give this album like a 3 out of 10. Not my thing. The next one out was Florida Georgia Line's Can't Say I Ain't Country. I have a whole review of this album on my channel. I think I gave it a 5 or a 5.2 or something, but check out that review for my extended thoughts on Can't Say I Ain't Country. I am still spinning Speed of Love and Told You from this record. I really like those songs. Next was Robert Ellis's Texas Piano Man.
When you're away, little things overwhelm me.
This is a record that I really liked. I really like this album, but it definitely wasn't a country album. It's definitely taken a turn from where Robert Ellis used to do stuff. So if you guys aren't familiar with him, he's an awesome solo musician. He also has performed with the band Traveler, who's on one of my year-end lists from last year with their song Western Movies. And this record has a sort of Billy Joel / Elton John vibe. It's like a piano pop record with just a sprinkling, just maybe a lime squeeze of Texas honky tonk on it. I mean, he has a real natural twang, and there is a sort of saloon vibe to it, but it feels much more cosmopolitan to me, like he's kind of in a New York piano lounge. There's a few songs on here that are so expertly written and so beautiful and so just kind of quirky. Robert Ellis' style is very whimsical in a way. He kind of has a real humor to how he delivers things, but he's also a sad sack. And you get both of those vibes on this record. It reminds me of Ben Folds kind of added a few country elements into his sound. That might be what Robert Ellis sounds like. Passive Aggressive is a really funny song. He Made Me Do It is a song about kind of the dark side of himself that I think is really kind of interesting and naughty. And my favorite song on this record is Father. To me, it's the real standout. It's a song about him longing for a relationship with his father. But he'll settle for a friend if he can't have a father. And man, it's really heartbreaking, but really beautiful. For me, it's a Song of the Year contender, and there's so much good stuff on this record. Again, I don't know if I'd call it a country album. I know I wouldn't call it a country album, but it's a really good album from someone who is country adjacent. So I'd give this album like an 8.5 out of 10. I really liked it. The next 3 albums that came out all kind of have a different shade of perspectives on America. And the first one of those is Hayes Carll's What It Is.
In times like these, everyone could use a hand.
Now, Hayes Carll is someone that I first heard about in an interview with Miranda Lambert that I did when I was still at Entertainment Weekly, and she mentioned one of her favorite underrated songwriters was this guy from Texas, Hayes Carll. I remember looking him up and being like, this guy is weird. I was still just like, a little pop country fan then that didn't really know about the whole red dirt scene, that didn't really have my more indie-ish sensibilities, and I was like, this guy is really weird and really off the deep end, and I really didn't like it. Over time, I've come to really appreciate what Hayes Carll does. He is now it seems to have found a more accessible way to present himself. His songwriting is sensitive, self-aware, still pretty humorous, and definitely sincere, but also funny. There's songs on here that are very political as he's reflecting on America. There's a song called Fragile Men, which is very wisely paired with a song called Wild Pointy Finger, because Fragile Men is kind of a song accusing fragile men who can't handle the world all not going their way right now. And then Wild Pointy Finger is a very kind of funny song about like a finger that just wants to point and blame other people and accuse them of things, whether that's things he admires or whether that's things that he is intimidated by. There's definitely a theme of commitment on this record, and I like that about it a lot. It seems searching, and it makes the sort of light little indictment on a song like Fragile Men feel not so accusatory, because you can see that he is not someone that just gives up on another person. So there's a real sort of emotional maturity. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. And I Will Stay, the album closer here, is just a gorgeous song about trying to quell someone's insecurities and maybe his own doubts that he might leave, and just saying, no, through everything, I will stay. It's so beautiful. I also really, really love American Dream, which is a really even-handed just kind of survey of what it's like to drive through America and be on tour. I'm a sucker for touring songs that musicians put out, but I really like this record. I think it lacks hooks for me. I only really remember the hook of I Will Stay, but the songwriting on here, especially the song Jesus and Elvis, which if you remember from Kenny Chesney's album Cosmic Hallelujah, he recorded. Hayes Carll has it on here, and he wrote that with his current love, Allison Moorer, and Matraka Berg. That song's beautiful. So there's great songwriting, there's a great emotional maturity, but it's a little bit lacking hooks, like real just sticky melodies. So I would give this album a 7.5 out of 10. Next up is Ryan Bingham's American Love Song.
How the moon will cry.
A lot of you guys when this album came out were like, you need to listen to Ryan Bingham. And when I said I hadn't really ever given Ryan Bingham a chance, y'all were trolling me on Twitter so hard saying I need to listen to Ryan Bingham. So I finally did. This is my first Ryan Bingham album. I know it's not the one that I'm supposed to listen to first. Everyone's like, listen to Mescalito. Well, guess what? I didn't. This was my first foray into Ryan Bingham, and it was fine. It was fine. I mean, this album, his voice is kind of reminds me of Bob Dylan. And he seems very world-weary and fairly, maybe a little cynical on this album. It's very long. I think there's a lot that could be cut from this album and it would tighten it up a lot. But as it is, I couldn't really figure out a clear narrative identity on this. There's a song on here called, there's a few songs on here that are reflecting on America and how lost it's gotten. And they're definitely delivered with a bit more sort of cynicism and anger than Hayes Carll's, which felt a little more questioning. And these just feel a little more angry. Kind of in the same way that American Aquarium's last record did to me. But I really like a few songs on here. I really like Situation Station because it's such a melodic shift from the rest of the album. It really stands out to me. And then I really like Stones and how serious it is and it's pleading for grace. But on the whole, guys, it wasn't my favorite. I'd give this album a 5.5 out of 10. The next album I want to talk about is one that a lot of you guys recommended to me, and I'm so glad I checked it out because favorite album in the video alert, it's my favorite album in this video and my favorite album from this 2-month period, and it's Charles Wesley Godwin's Seneca.
I never would have guessed it in 100 years more.
I'm willing to bet that Charles Wesley Godwin is going to be kind of our next Tyler Childers, who himself was kind of the next Sturgill Simpson. Charles Wesley Godwin is a guy from West Virginia, from coal country. I think he lives in Ohio now, but he has put out this album called Seneca, which is named after the Seneca Creek over in his area of the Allegheny Mountains where he grew up. And it is really this love letter to West Virginia and to kind of his Appalachian upbringing. There's songs on here from the very beginning, like Windmills, where windmills are now replacing, as an energy source, a lot of where the coal mines were up in these mountains. And there's another song on here called Coal Country, and I think that you really get the sense that he both sort of lightly questions, but really appreciates that whole area and the naturalism of it and the creakiness of it and the age of it and the tradition of it. And so I think this album is delivered with a lot of beautiful reflection about his upbringing. But it also sounds awesome. It just sounds expensive. And yet, it's about coal country. And so it really sounds so organic and creaky in a way. His voice has a sort of natural bleeding timbre to it that makes it almost kind of in the same way Hozier does. And it makes his words feel so serious. He's so good at storytelling. In some ways, it kind of reminds me of Scottish folk songs, the way he sings, but it's Appalachian songs. It's not Scottish songs. But I love his voice, and there's little flourishes, little production choices on here. There's a crow noise. There's the kind of coal miner echoes on some songs, and there's just a real bellowing of how the guitars sound on this record, and everything feels intentional and well cared for, and like I said, kind of expensive and fancy. I really like the song Strawberry Queen, and it gives a great sense of how deep his voice can go. I really, really loved the song Sorry for the Wait. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. But the kind of Feathered Indians, I think, going to be a runaway standout from this album. I think it's going to be Hardwood Floors. Hardwood Floors is a surprisingly fun song on this sort of serious, maybe somber would be the word, more than serious, record. And it is just a jam. And it makes you feel a sort of deep in your soul mountain joy. And I really think this album does that all throughout it to me, and I think it blew me away. It blew me away. And so I'm really impressed with him. I can't wait to kind of see where he goes. I'm not just saying it because we seem to have the same haircut and beard, but which many of you have pointed out. But I really, really am into this record. And so bravo to him. Let's keep an eye on Charles Wesley Godwin. Then we have another album that I really liked a lot, which is Yola's Walk Through Fire. Now, Yola's been on my radar for a while because I used to have a column in The Guardian. If you didn't know, The Guardian is published in the UK, and Yola is from the UK, so I have sort of, I think, a disproportionate number of people that have followed me for a few years that are from the UK, and then a lot of them have been like, hey, you gotta check out Yola. The first thing you gotta know about Yola is that she has a voice. It's husky, it can go low, she can belt, it's kind of got this torchy sound to it, and she shows it off all over this record. This is really somewhere between country and soul and Americana. There are moments that feel like we're kind of picking the blues up in the Appalachian Mountains. There's moments that feel like we're in Muscle Shoals and we've got organs, and those are actually the ones that don't stand out as much to me. And then there are songs like her debut single, Ride Out in the Country, that just feel like straight up country songs. Just lots of pedal steel, lots of kind of this mournful tone to them. And she just delivers and delivers and delivers vocally time after time after time. I think if you're going to check out 3 tracks from this record that really capture those vibes, listen to Ride Out in the Country, which is that country song I just mentioned, with a kind of cool, creepy video. The next track on the album is then It Ain't Easier, which is my favorite vocal on the album. It's a big soul song. And then the next track after that is one called Walk Through Fire, the title track on the record. And that really gives me sort of the synthesis of those two sounds, the country side and the more soul blues side, into this kind of Appalachian sound that I think is my kind of favorite vibe of the record. I think her voice is so distinct and so different than what I'm used to hearing in country music that when it's kind of put up against country sounds, it just feels so exciting and fresh. And when it's in kind of more the soul, Anderson East kind of vibe, it doesn't stand out to me as much. As being something different and new that I haven't encountered before. I think the record is maybe a little bit overproduced. Sometimes I'm like, okay, enough with the organs, or enough with adding in this kind of vintage vibe. It maybe can feel a little overly cutesy and sort of remove the power that's in the voice. That does happen, but on the whole, I really like this record, and I think the cover of it, shout out to the cover of this album. I love it. Almost as much as I love Robert Ellis's cover. Flashback to that, because these are two beautiful covers. Should I do a video ranking my favorite country covers of all time? Maybe, I don't know. But I would give this record maybe like a 7.2 out of 10. The next record is the Cactus Blossoms' Easy Way.
Got a lot of love to give.
I really love the Cactus Blossoms. I love their sort of harmonies that move in lockstep. If Yola had us hanging out in the 1970s, I would say the Cactus Blossoms are more kind of in the 50s and 60s in their sound. This album is gorgeous. It'll make you feel like you are walking down the beach, slowly looking at the sun, set over like a Hawaiian ocean. You know, it's just breezy and gorgeous. There's a few songs on here like Downtown, which is a really sort of sensitive moment where they are inviting kind of angry executives to reflect on poorer people, but it's delivered in this kind of gentle, sort of hippie-ish way. And then there's another song on here called Calling You that I'm just obsessed with. I'm really, really obsessed with Calling You and that idea that you want to just break through your regular cycles and reach out to someone so that you don't go to a bad place in your kind of weird rituals of being sad. This album's really lovely. It's quite a vibe. I've listened to it many times. I'm gonna give it like a 7.7 out of 10. The next album I want to talk about is Maren Morris's Girl.
I don't feel myself right now. Maybe I should just.
Now, this was an album that was preceded by a single of the same name, which I have a reaction to on this channel, so check that out. And this is definitely a pop album that tends more toward R&B than it does toward country. I definitely think it's pretty misclassified as a country album. Although there are a few shout outs to the country crowd, including my favorite track, All My Favorite People, which is a song that she does with the Brothers Osborne that's really lighthearted and fun. Now, I really like Maren Morris when she's being lighthearted and silly and fun. There's a song on here called The Feels, where it's kind of the same vibe as All My Favorite People, sort of a pop rock country-ish sort of summery vibe with some fun wordplay. It reminds me of Drunk Girls Don't Cry, which is the first song I ever heard by Maren Morris. And maybe that's why like my entry point to her was sort of this glib thing, but I think she does that super well. Now, there's another song on here called Make Out With Me that I think, to me, is actually my favorite track on this record, although it is completely kind of like an R&B sex jam. Like it's a make-out jam, not a sex jam, but a jam. And I think she sounds kind of most interested on those R&B-ish tracks like this and RSVP, which, you know, that's more the sex jam. But those are where I hear just more interest in her voice. But I also think that there's an element of Make Out With Me, All My Favorite People, and The Feels that has that sort of lighthearted humor. And I think the reason those really stand out to me on this album is that it's an album that doesn't interface very much with weakness. I get the sense that she doesn't like to appear weak or present herself as weak, which I think can make for a sort of not that compelling listen, because my hope with listening to art is always that it's going to invite me to feel a little less crazy. Like, oh, someone else feels the same way I do. And this is, you know, she's recently married, and I think this album is much more just kind of celebratory of her success as an artist and her, enjoyment of a new marriage. And for me, it feels a little edgeless at times, and that's kind of opaque. It's hard for me to enter into that. So that's why I like when things are feeling a little more humorous or sexy or something that's not just, here I am, like, our love is gold, or, you know, we have a lot in common all together, or even on the lead single Girl, where it's like, pick yourself up off the floor. That's like that one moment of vulnerability I really feel. But even that, it's saying like, you know, get it together, girl. But I kind of like that we got to see a little behind the curtain, a little bit of weakness. But for the most part, I feel like the album kind of has its guard up. And I think the production of it's one of those things where this is kind of the most vanilla sort of production to me, where you're trying to take a little, tossing enough bones to normalize this as country, but then not trying to have drops and sort of crazy synths that classify it as pop, and you end up with something I think kind of bland and forgettable. But I do think on the songs where they kind of pump up either like the trap beat, like on RSVP, or like All My Favorite People, where they go a little more hard-edged into rock, they just make those songs musically better, even if they're not making them more country. They just sound better because they have more of a direction and more of a style. Most of the album kind of runs together for me. So I don't think it's bad, though. I just think it's, I don't know. That's what I think about it. I'd give it a 5.8. Next up was Jake Owen's Greetings from Jake.
Got a house down a back road, got a flag.
This was a really solid album. It actually really surprised me. I enjoyed listening to this album quite a bit. And Jake Owen is so up and down in my estimation. Half the songs he releases, I'm not a fan of, and then half of them I am a fan of. And for every time that we get a song like Real Life that is just like a sort of Sesame Street pop song to me, you get a really tender, impressive song, something like What We Ain't Got. And he's kind of found a middle road, it seems like, on this record between the sort of traditional seriousness and the overly pop kind of sound that he often tends toward. And he's just found something that kind of is charming and rich and organic sounding, and it also lets him be charismatic and gregarious and fun, and he is fun. He genuinely comes across as very fun on this record. I think the album cover, where you get this postcard from Florida, it feels like a sort of partyish album from Florida. Not a dirty party album, but a lot kind of like Port St. Joe by the Brothers Osborne last year. I think that's a little bit superior of a record, but this has a lot of fun moments on it. It doesn't necessarily feel cohesive because I don't think Jake wrote, but maybe on one or two of the tracks. But there's a lot to like here. This is definitely my favorite production that Joey Moy has ever put together. I actually really enjoy the sound of this record, and I think there's actually pedal steel, and there's actually like nice guitar tones. It's different than he produces other people. There are the kind of poppier moments, like the song with Lele Pons, which isn't the disaster that I was thinking it would be. I really enjoy, actually, of everything on this record, Drink All Day, that kind of, that's almost the mission statement of this record. It's silly, it's lighthearted, it's very likable. You get sort of the beachy vibes that Jake Owen is known for, and it's a fun, hooky chorus. I do think the writing on this album isn't as good as the hooks. I think on songs even like Homemade and Made For You, sometimes it just feels like we're trying to get to a line. We're trying to just set up all the lyrics so we can twist them at the end. And so we're listing all these things that are homemade, but they're not really pushing a story forward, just so we can have a chorus that uses the word home made me the person I am. And that's a good line, but it feels sometimes like the verses are just trying to get us to the good line. Homemade, to me, is probably going to be a single. I really, really like Drink All Day. I know, it's a silly pop beachy trifle, but I think it's a fun song. That whole life is sweeter than a margarita, and that is something about the cadence of that is really fun. The whole album just kind of works. It's too long. I would cut a few songs. The Kid Rock collaboration is truly shocking when you hear his voice come in. I would turn it down and tell Kid Rock just to sing a little more pleasantly because he sounds like he is in a bar fight. But on the whole, I don't know. Not like a big album that's trying to stir anything up, but a surprisingly nice album from Jake Owen. I would give it a 6.7. After that, we got Brothers by Locash.
It's only 8 and the speakers are banging. Yeah, this place is already lit.
Look, Locash are guys that, just looking at pictures of them, they sort of epitomize this. Their vibe appears quite douchey, Las Vegas, like dude that is maybe 20 years past the time he should be wearing like the torn up jeans and chains and just they look like very skeezy. And yet this album is a lot more sort of innocuous and pleasant than I was expecting it to be. I think it does itself very well to start with one big country song and How Much Time You Got, because those and the final track, Beers to Catch Up On, are definitely the most likable tracks, and then the whole middle of this record just feels like a Backstreet Boys album to me. Like it feels it's just overproduced. It's like that exact snap track sound I absolutely hate that like removes me from story. But this album feels kind of like made for like a shopping mall or like a beachside cafe outside of like Luke Bryan's Crash My Playa tour. Like it's very, very commercial, very generic. I don't feel like it's personal at all, and those things are all big negatives. At the same time, it's a fairly good version of that pop country sound. But I'm glad that there is like an avenue for all of the bro country tracks that are kind of going out of style. I'm glad that like I feel like Locash can just aggregate them and they can go all on the Locash albums, all like the random Ben Hayslip or Red Akins tracks that I don't really want to hear on all the other country albums. I'm glad they can go to Locash. I do think One Big Country Song, the album opener here, definitely has a big poppy beat underneath it, but that thing's going to be a smash. If One Big Country Song gets released, it's going to be this sort of undeniably likable track for country fans, and country radio will eat it up. That's just about how the whole world is a big country song, and we can all get along because we like country music. Look, you're gonna sit there and listen to it the first time back, Grady. You've lost your edge, and I'm gonna say, no, I haven't. I'm right, and I think secretly deep down you like that song. So on the whole, this album ain't for me, but I get why people would like it. I'm gonna give it a 4. And then finally, the coup de grace of this video, what so many of you have requested, George Strait's Honky Tonk Time Machine, which came out about a week ago.
Maybe just like you, it's something new, I just had to try.
This album's great. It really is great. I think I saw on Saving Country Music's review of this, he said if you looked up, country music in the dictionary, you could just define it with 2 words, George Strait. I think that's pretty true, and this album captures that. I mean, even the title, Honky Tonk Time Machine, it is suggesting some sort of return to the true nature of country music. Not that George has ever strayed that far, but this album just feels like not like a big protest, but just like a really solid reminder of, oh yeah, this is what country music sounds like. This is what it's like to have steel guitar laid into a track and fiddle kind of laced throughout an album. And there's themes on here of God and country music. That would be one. That would be one of them on the song God and Country Music, and also the song What Goes Up, which is kind of a gospel track. There is a real love of country music, even in the imagery of the song Old Violin, which I know is a cover. There is the gorgeousness of instrumentation all through here. I think piano gets a lot. Does a lot of work on this record, making it sound so awesome. And I think on songs like Honky Tonk Time Machine, you hear that really well. And Every Little Honky Tonk Bar, I think, is a great choice as a lead single for this record. It does feel very Texan. I feel like if I wanted to explain to someone, what are the differences in Nashville country and Texas country right now, maybe the easiest entry point for people would be these last 2 records I just talked about. Locash was very representative of kind of what's happening in Nashville right now and that kind of weird pop fusion. This record is a great definer of what either 90s Nashville country sounded like or kind of where Texas music is sort of landing. You've got all of this, and it's classic. It's George Strait. He's the king of Texas. He's Amarillo by morning, and I think there's a lot of beauty on this record as well. The standouts here are going for me. My favorite track on the record, sort of inexplicably, because it almost feels like a Kenny Chesney song, is Blue Water. Blue Water is just a fun, summery track, and that it sort of propels itself with this happy energy, and that chorus of Blue Water is so fun to say. It's been stuck in my head. But I think the one that really is hitting people in the heart is probably Some Nights.
Some days are better than others.
Which is a song about how life is hard. And it's told really beautifully. Don't even get me started on Some Nights. That's the chorus line there. There's a song on here called Codigo that I'd maybe drop because it just feels like a shout out to his own tequila brand. Codigo reminds me a little bit of Robert Ellis's Topo Chico and Lime, where it's just a fun song about a beverage. But it feels a little bit frivolous. Weight of the Badge is a kind of a story song about a cop and the seriousness that being a cop is. So I just feel like we're getting a lot of different shades here. And in some ways it feels like this record is meant to be a survey of the sort of storytelling balladry. We get a classic cover in Old Violin. We get statements about honky tonks as institutions that play country music and you go dance at them with Every Little Honky Tonk Bar and Honky Tonk Time Machine. And then we get a shout out to Willie Nelson with Sing One with Willie, which I really like. It's a stupid song. It is a song about how George Strait feels insecure that he's never gotten to duet with Willie Nelson. And, I'm glad they got to record this song together because I don't know how long Willie's going to be around. Willie keeps having to cancel shows, and I think it wouldn't shock me if Willie Nelson passes away in the next few years. And so I'm glad that they got to make this song, and it's sort of a fun country legend moment. So I think this album overall is great. Really, I've listened to it probably like 4 or 5 times just because it's pleasant to listen to, and it feels like, okay, if I need to show someone what just country music was with a name they might recognize this year, kind of how I think of country music, it'd be hard to find an album that more sort of epitomizes it than Honky Tonk Time Machine. I don't know that we have any bad songs on this record, but I don't know that we reach some of the like heights of just whoa that I sometimes have felt on something like Seneca by Charles Wesley Godwin. But I'm gonna give this album a solid like 8.1 out of 10. All right, guys, that is a lot of albums. Hopefully you clicked around, or hopefully you watched all of it, you know? So I appreciate you guys sticking here with the channel. That stuff's down in the Spotify list down below. I know I missed some albums, but it's okay. We're all gonna survive. Tons of stuff coming up on the channel soon. Thank you for loving country music with me, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.